Have you ever asked God, what in the world is going on? Sometimes our lives are so flooded with events and circumstances that we are just left reeling from one to another. In this episode, we are going to talk about circumstances and how we can regain better control of our lives. Welcome to the Cristian Coaching School Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Leelo Bush. I'm a master coach, author, curriculum creator, and the #1 authority on spirit-led Christian coaching. I've trained tens of thousands worldwide since 2003. If you're ready to up-level your skills, find greater fulfillment, and employ the most powerful coaching available to mankind, let's go. Welcome to this episode of the Cristian Coaching School Podcast. I am so excited that you have joined me. Thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. Please stay until the end because I will share a big surprise that I discovered over the course of this last year. I'm Dr. Leelo Bush, and if you have been with me for some years, you will know that I have not brought you any podcasts for quite some time. And there's very good reason for this. Because I am relaunching the podcast with this episode and also rebranding with new images, we will resume with what I'll call Season 2, Episode 1. In doing this, I thought it would be important to fill in the gap and catch you up on my life and share some of the lessons learned and discuss how we can all get better control over our lives. If you have secretly thought, boy, I bet Dr. Bush lives a charmed life. Look at all she's doing. Well, you're about to learn different. Around the time of our most recent episode, I learned that I would become a grandmother. As you might imagine, this was wonderful news. My only child was having a baby. But what I could not anticipate was what would happen next. Within a couple of days after my granddaughter's birth, I learned more about the precarious circumstances and that most likely my husband, Evan, and I would be caring for a very sick little baby. Not for a few days, not for weeks or months, but for over a year. And let me tell you, you just can't imagine what you are capable of until you have no other good choice. It's difficult enough when you are young to raise your children with all the constant attention required and other challenges that babies bring. But when you have a special needs baby, one who cries around the clock, this is a whole new world. And here is where I want to give a shout out to one of my best friends and colleagues, Debbie Stankovich, who flew all the way from Washington State to Florida, here where we live, and stayed with us for 11 days to help us get sleep, regain our bearings, and figure out how on earth we were going to do this thing. And God could not have put anyone more qualified in my life than Debbie. She had so much experience. Plus, she also serves as a CASA, better known in Washington State as a court-appointed children's advocate. It took over 6 months, but eventually my granddaughter started getting better. And by the time she was 14 months old, she was reunited with her parents. This happened almost simultaneously with the COVID-19 shutdown. No sooner had my granddaughter left than Evan and I became very, very ill. It's possible that we had COVID, but neither of us know for sure. all I can say is I don't remember ever being that sick before. But fortunately, we take good care of our immune systems, and within a couple of weeks, we were feeling substantially better. Well, then came the shutdown and lockdown. The academy had taken off even more vigorously because everything was going online. And because I and our team were fundamentally prepared and already accustomed to working online, we were thriving. But because there was little life outside of our work, taking more training and certification courses became Evan's and my daily pastime. Our time was our own again, and we dove in with excitement to learn everything we could inside this window of opportunity. And while I'm thinking of it, I learned something really interesting. I have not done any advertising or promotion for the Academy since around 2019, and the Academy is still humming along. What this shows me is that we continue to exist not because we're smart and we work really hard, which of course we do, but rather because God ordained it. And it doesn't matter who or what comes against God, they're not going to win. In fact, if anything, we will grow stronger and more abundant than ever. Well, getting back to the events, a short while after Evan and I started feeling better, I was awakened one morning by splashing. What on earth? I came out of the master bedroom to find myself ankle deep in water. I quickly woke up Evan to let him know what was going on. He ran out and turned off the water to our house, but it was too late. The water had already filled the insulation and soaked through the ceiling drywall. Under the weight of the water, the ceiling in the hallway and master suite began to cave in. Evan had been trying to get the water cleaned up when I saw a massive chunk begin to come down, and I was able to alert Evan so that he could get out of the way just in time. We came to find out that we had experienced a pipe burst because we have overhead plumbing here in Florida. Because of everything else that was starting to go on in the world, insurance adjusters were booked way far in advance, and it took weeks to get an adjuster here, and then another 8 weeks or so to find out whether they would approve the loss, which thankfully they did. But talk about an interruption of life. We were still able to use the bedroom once everything got dried up, but because the ceiling was missing, there was dangling shreds of insulation that would blow around eerily every time the AC vent came on. It took some work, but eventually everything in the house was repaired and looked good as new. It was actually a blessing because it looked better than it had previous to the pipe burst. We had a couple weeks reprieve before my beloved white toy poodle Blanco unexpectedly passed away. He was very old, but had always been healthy, and he had been my constant companion in my office and my personal life. If you've ever lost a dear pet, I don't have to tell you how it feels. 2 weeks to the day after we lost Blanco, I woke up early one morning to hear my phone ringing. It was too early to talk to anyone, so I didn't answer it, but when I looked at the caller ID, it had been a call from my cousin in Iowa. Why on earth would she be calling me so early in the morning? I decided to call her later and went about making coffee. So I grabbed my coffee and came out to the dining room to start opening up the windows of the house. Our dining room faces the front of the house, so we have an expansive view of our street right there from our dining room windows. And it was about that time that I noticed a small car very slowly driving by our house, and behind the car, a police SUV. They slowed to a stop, and parked across the street from our house. The car door opened, and a woman with a notebook emerged. She walked over to the police car as the officer got out. They spoke for a moment and then slowly started making their way to our house. Evan was still asleep, and not wanting to wake him, I went out the front door and asked if I could help them. The two looked at each other and asked me to identify myself, which I did. I was then told that they were here to see me. I excused myself to come back in the house and wake up Evan. Something wasn't right. Evan quickly got up, and together we met the two and proceeded to get seated in the living room. It was then they told me that my brother, my only sibling and only immediate family, had been the victim of a hit-and-run accident in Columbus, Ohio, and had been pronounced dead at the scene. It happened on the eve of his 60th birthday. I knew at that moment that my life would never be the same. And it hasn't been. Suddenly, the call from my cousin started to make sense because she was best friends with my brother's employer. And this is who the police initially contacted in order to find my brother's next of kin. She was calling me to express their condolences and didn't even know that I hadn't heard what had happened. Clearly, there is the shock and grief aspect, which one can't underestimate. I am more grateful than ever that God gave me the opportunity to create the Joy Restoration course, or Christian Grief Coach Training and Certification Program. This knowledge has been my saving grace. Now, grief and loss are one thing, but the sheer complexity of dealing with all of the various players, including my brother's work associates, relatives, disillusioned friends, attorneys, insurance, probate, finance, and expenses, it's been mind-boggling. Added to that was the fact that my brother lived alone, over 1,000 miles away from us. Added to that, when people learned of his death, some of them tried to illegally enter his house. One of them even had the police break down the doors to my brother's house to do a welfare check, which is strange because the police already knew what had happened to my brother because the same precinct responded to his accident. Added to that, there was no will, which really complicated things. Added to that, my brother had several projects going that had to be cared for. And let's add that there were attorneys and legal considerations that took my time and attention on almost a daily basis. Evan had to travel to Columbus many, many times to oversee things, so he was gone about as much as he was here during this period of time, and the list goes on. A couple weeks after the accident, I needed to get some fresh air and invited Evan to take a walk with me. It was on our way home that my neighbor's dog attacked me. He was a very large dog that had knocked me off my feet previously, and maybe he wasn't trying to hurt me, but he kept lunging at me, and he was so strong that Evan couldn't restrain him. After everything I had been through, it was just too much. The neighbors weren't any help because they just stood there and laughed. After everything I had been through, I was so shook up, I came home and called the police. When the police got here, they made sure I was okay and then proceeded to give our neighbors a stern warning for not having their dog on a leash as required by law. All that said, as of this podcast, my brother's affairs still aren't fully settled and probate is still ongoing, and we are now 18 months after the accident. Now, all of this may sound pretty straightforward, But there was so much more. These are only the bullet points or the 30,000-foot view. All of this led to my getting sick back in October when Evan had to take me to the hospital. The good news is that after a weekend of absolutely every kind of test you can imagine, I was released with a clean bill of health. The doctor attributed my sudden illness to the anxiety resulting from everything that had happened in my life. The lesson here is that even though I have been very well in control of my thoughts and my emotions, because thankfully I am well trained in thought work, yet there is a physiological component that is connected to stress and anxiety, which is why it seemed to come at me out of nowhere. It wasn't my thoughts. I was feeling perfectly fine until I wasn't. So I decided it was more important to take care of myself than work. And I am so blessed that I have a wonderful husband and a great team who have made it possible for me to take care of myself for a while. But now it's time to get back to the academy. I have so much great training to share with you. And we have during this time created the Genesis of Christian Coaching 3.0 and a free introductory masterclass to tell you more about it. If you've already enrolled or graduated from Christian Coach Training a couple years ago, new files are available for you in our exclusive online training center. And if you are new, you'll learn at the end of this podcast how you can access the master class for free. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope it's explained to you why I had to take some time off, but God is good and we are back. And for any of you who were aware of what's going on, thank you for your prayers. I have one thing to say to the enemy. I'm still here, and we're still changing lives around the world. As promised, I want to share a surprise with you that I discovered over the course of the last year. Those who know me well also know that I have had a silent struggle with my weight for decades. It seemed no matter what I did, be it diet or exercise, nothing worked in the long run. I would lose a few pounds and then gain them back plus more. But I finally cracked the code for healthy, permanent weight loss. And to date, I have lost 60 pounds. That's 60. And I did it without a timeline, without starving, without a diet program, and without a goal weight. Crazy, right? People have told me they almost didn't recognize me, and almost everyone has asked me how I did it. To be honest, the events of the past few years did nothing to help me lose weight. In fact, I gained more weight. But once I discovered how I could lose weight, and I made some changes to my daily life, pound by pound, the weight started falling off. If you would like more information, or if you'd like to participate in a coaching program so that you can lose a few pounds or a lot of pounds, please send me an email to support@beautifulhelpdesk.com. I'll make sure this email link is added to our show notes. Just know that this is not a magic pill, but rather a God-honoring lifestyle change because He wants us to take care of our temple. In conclusion, I just want to share here that when it seems like there is so much coming at you, realize that the enemy knows even more than we do sometimes about the great mission that God has set before us. And he's trying to stop us. Maybe he's trying to stop you too. But don't let him. Please let me know in the comments if you've been through a rough patch in your life. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'm thankful for your prayers because we know prayers move the hands of God. It's because of this that we pray for everyone at our schools and those connected to us by email. every day. Now go out and make this a great day. I'm Dr. Leelo Bush, and I'll meet you again on our next episode of the Cristian Coaching School Podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you've got to join me in my free introductory coaching masterclass. I created this program so that you can experience the power of coaching and see if we're a fit to help you achieve your training and certification goals. Visit us at pccca.org/get certified. Be sure to download the worksheets after you sign in so that you don't miss a thing. Again, that's pccca.org/get certified. See you there.